Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. 84th iteration as such. I am your host, Dusty O'Connell, and I am joined by our regular in-house analyst, Vikings blogger, and hater of sleep, Arif Hassan. How you doing, Arif?
I'm good. How are you?
I am excellent. I'm well rested. I actually overslept as well last night, although my definition of oversleeping is a little different than yours. We are joined by a guest this week in advance of our contest against the Detroit Lions, and he's a writer for the Detroit News. He's actually been the Lions beat writer for the last 3 years, I believe. His name is Josh Katzenstein. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thanks for having me on, guys. But I'm wondering now, if this is the 84th episode, are you going to pay some sort of tribute to Randy Moss?
Oh, wow. We really should have done that, huh?
I'll find a way to work in a petite Randy Moss joke. That'll have to do. Although I will say that the only Vikings jersey I own is a throwback Moss jersey. So, and I'm not even wearing it.
It's literally legit.
It's I've been around the block once or twice. So actually, I'm going to go put that on. And customarily, when we have guests on the show, we tend to kind of break down the game from the perspective of each side of the ball. I imagine that the Minnesota defense versus the Detroit offense is the more interesting of the two matchups, just in the sense that, Minnesota doesn't really have much of an offense, it seems like, and Detroit doesn't really have much of a defense.
It seems like. Well, remember, Detroit's defense last year, that was pretty good, so it could still be hiding.
Yeah, and it was one game in which they were missing one of their two best defensive players, DeAndre Levy, and it doesn't look like he's going to play this week, but, still, I think it's too early to say that all of a sudden the Lions are going to go from, second to bottom 5 defense in the league, but we'll see, what happens. Obviously, Phillip Rivers, actually, I think he sort of presented a similar challenge to Teddy Bridgewater, just based on what Bridgewater put on tape last year, just with the, accurate passing. And obviously he didn't show that on Monday night against the 49ers. But yeah, the Lions defense versus the Vikings offense should be interesting, because I don't know that it's necessarily as high-powered as the Chargers looked to be the other day. But yeah, offensively for the Lions, I'm really curious to see how the Vikings will try to cover Golden Tate. I assume Xavier Rhodes is going to cover Calvin Johnson for the most part, right?
Well, that's what happened last year. We don't know if the Vikings are going to, because Mike Zimmer expressed a preference in the offseason, and then he did actually during the season last year to stick to right side, left side designations because of footwork. But as you may remember, or from last year, Xavier Rhodes did trail Calvin Johnson all across, but that was because of what the Vikings thought was a bit of a lack of talent. Or actually, more likely, a big matchup problem with Calvin Johnson's height and, Josh Robinson, Captain Munnerlin's height. And so I don't know if that's going to happen. Obviously, Terrence Newman, not, a statuesque, Adonis figure. I mean, he's kind of short, too. And he had some troubles in the game, but, he was pretty okay last year, and it looked like he looked pretty good in camp this year. So, I don't know if they're going to stick to right side, left side designations, but and I'm also kind of a little bit frustrated that the beat didn't ask, but I wasn't there. Oops. But yeah, if
I didn't have a chance to ask Mike Zimmer because the conference call with him today was the same time as our presser with Jim Caldwell, so unfortunately that fell by the wayside. But yeah, either way, I mean, however they deploy those guys, I think the matchup of the Lions receivers against the Vikings cornerbacks, really could decide the game, because obviously the Chargers found a way to lock those guys down last week, and I'm guessing, no matter how well the cornerbacks are doing or how much the coaches trust them, there's going to be plenty of safety help, certainly on Calvin Johnson's side. But, if they devote too much attention, you would think Golden Tate could go off. But obviously the Lions really executed poorly against the Chargers on offense. They started off really well. Eric Ebron had a nice game besides one drop. And, Theo Riddick looked really good late, but I don't expect him to be involved in anything more than a 2-minute offense, at least not based on week one and sort of what people are saying out here. And then really it all comes down to the offensive line and Matthew Stafford. I mean, the line looked pretty good and really good in the first half, but then there were some communication issues in the second half. They got flustered by a couple of the fake blitz packages that the Chargers used. And I think the matchup between Everson Griffin and Riley Reif, could play a big factor in the game too. But the Lions,
you wrote a pretty good piece on the offensive line just this morning, I think, or just now. That's in the Detroit News. And let's talk a little bit more about the Reif Griffin matchup. Both players, I think, are fairly underrated. Griffin had a pretty bad game, last week, but he was pretty good last year, and Riley Reif was too. What's so interesting about this short arm dude from Iowa?
Well, I mean, he's just a really instinctual player, and he actually seems to be a lot stronger now than he was when he came into the league. You guys obviously remember that, a lot of teams were thinking about moving him to guard. The conversation about him coming out was kind of similar to Brandon Scherf this year, not just because they went to Iowa, but I think Reif is expected to be much better this year. I don't know that the Lions are committed to him being their left tackle long term, so that might be a telling sign that, he is a little beatable, and one of those miscommunications, he might be partly to blame. It was unclear based on the film, and the Lions are hardly an open book, so we'll never know. But, there was a free rusher from his side, and he was, going to block another guy. It might have been an assignment for the running back to pick up that blitzer, but either way, he's far from perfect, but I think you guys would probably agree that Griffin is too. But Reif is capable of, having a really solid game, more so in pass blocking than running. I think if the Lions get Adrian Waddle, their right tackle back, and if they get Larry Warford, their right guard back, who's their best offensive lineman, I think you'll probably see them run towards the right side a lot because that's where they had the most success the past couple of years with Warford in there.
And so Travis Swanson, did he play center last year?
He played one game, the game where Raiola was suspended, Week 17 against the Packers.
Oh, right, Dominic Raiola, what a damn. Is his play as a center, do you think that could be partially responsible for some of these communication issues?
I don't think so. Just based on talking to him and to Stafford, it seemed like, Stafford's the one making the calls. Swanson, excuse me. I still have Raiola on the mind. It's going to be a long time, I think, before Lions fans realize he's never, going to be on the field again. Though probably most of them are excited about that. Swanson said that it's his job to relay those calls to the linemen. So it's unclear, whether or not all the linemen heard. They only happen on a couple plays, or only cost the Lions on a couple plays. So I don't think it's the end of the world. But obviously, when, on the flip side of that 47 snaps, you say that, things could have been better. But if you have those two mishaps on 47 snaps, if you're having 70 snaps, you might have a couple more. So we'll see what happens. But I don't know that does TCF. I went to Minnesota, so I know TCF Bank Stadium fairly well. But I don't know that it's going to get as loud as Qualcomm Stadium was, just because it's fairly small, Yeah,
it's pretty. I mean, it doesn't have as many people, and it's got a pretty open horseshoe at one end. So, it's probably not going to be as loud. I'm sorry, Vikings fans. But I think sort of the offensive line. You looked into them a little bit closer than I did, but we both agreed that they look pretty good despite some of those injuries. They, in part, could contribute to some of the success that Amir Abdullah had, but even he was someone that I like coming out, that I think that you've been impressed by. You talked a little bit about Theo Riddick being in there. Zach Zenner, I think, is at the bottom of the depth chart. It's a young running back core that has a lot of explosiveness and a lot of agility. Do you think that there are some concerns about having all the same skill set, or the Lions are just really, really happy with the running backs that they have?
Well, don't forget, too, Joik Bell, who's 29. So he he fits basically everything that those other guys are not. I mean, he's an older guy. You know, he has some experience. He has that power element, maybe a little bit more so than center. You know, obviously that's not a big part of Riddick or Abdullah's game, but I think they like the balance of running backs that they have, just because, you know, mostly because of Abdullah. I mean, he looked really good all summer, and then obviously carried that into, you know, the first preseason game where he dazzled, and then it seemed like the Lions were just trying to hide him for the rest of the preseason, and then sure enough, his first carry on Sunday goes for a 24-yard touchdown, and it looked like he had no problem. I mean, he just went right through the hole, gave a little stutter step to Eric Weddle at the second level, and then that was it. And I think, you know, his cutting ability, his ability to, you know, start and stop so quickly after cuts, I think that's something that, as long as the offensive line gives him a chance, you know, he's going to continue to play really well. So Joyce Bell, I don't know that he's quite 100% yet. He didn't play in the preseason, spent most of the offseason, you know, laid up because he had surgeries on a knee and an Achilles tendon. So, I mean, those are obviously things that take a while to battle back from. But the fact that he was playing shows that the Lions, you know, trust where he is right now. But for the most part, I would think that Abdullah will be the one getting the most touches again in this game, just like he did in week one.
Do you see the Lions transitioning from, I mean, this seems really weird to me given sort of the history of the recent history of the Lions, but do you see them transitioning maybe, not now, but in the near future to more of a run-oriented team than a pass-oriented team? I mean, the passing game has struggled so far this year, and it definitely struggled a little bit under new offensive coordinator Lombardi last year. Do you see that possibly happening?
I think they've already started to make that transition. I think that's why, you know, you want to take a running back in the second round. Jim Caldwell said, I believe it was at owners' meetings in March, that, you know, they don't want to pass the ball any more than last year. He said that, you know, if they have the same number of passes last year, but they just complete a few more, then, you know, that would be the difference in maybe a couple of games. And he's all about clock control. I mean, Caldwell learned under Joe Paterno early in his coaching career. So, I mean, he often talks about, you know, if you can win defensively, win in the kicking game, then your offense, you know, doesn't have to, you know, blow the roof off. So I think we've sort of seen that, and that's what we saw in week one. I mean, there was really no aggression from the Lions offense. They didn't try to get it down the field to Calvin Johnson really at all. I mean, his best play was a slant, and obviously he only had, you know, 4 targets, but the Lions weren't trying to, you know, put him in motion, do anything to really isolate him in one-on-one coverage. And Golden Tate, I mean, as good as he is, you know, he's not going to beat a good cornerback or a speed cornerback over the top, you know, on a 9 route. So I think, you know, unless for some reason they decide that, you know, it's time to just go back to the Scott Linehan ways of throwing the ball to Calvin every play, I don't think, you know, you're going to see the 5,000-yard Matthew Stafford that we once knew.
Well, and I have a couple of questions to that point. First of all, the Lions ran, and they had the lowest number in the league of offensive plays in week one. They ran 47 offensive plays in week one. And according to an article on mlive.com, that is more than 28% fewer than they averaged even last season. I guess, one, do you anticipate that will, like, that is by design and that's kind of part of their transition to a running team? And two, how's Matt Stafford's elbow?
I'll answer 2 first because that's quicker. I don't think anyone needs to worry about that. He says he's fine. He was a full participant in practice. I think you're just going to see it. He'll probably wear a sleeve in game. But, you know, there were only a couple of series where it really seemed to bother him. He led a really nice touchdown drive right at the end of the game. So I don't think that's a big concern. But I think the 47 plays was really just more a factor of poor execution. I mean, a couple of those plays that we were talking about where there were miscommunications up front, those were both on third down. The 2 most notable ones were on third down. So, I mean, those ended drives. You know, one led to an interception, and I think overall the Lions just didn't stay on the field enough, and that's really a common theme in talking to the players, you know, Monday and today, that in order to help the defense, they just needed to keep the ball a lot longer. And of those 47 plays, I believe only 16 were runs. I can double-check that real quick, but let's see. Either way, I mean, they did not run the ball a whole lot, which that part was surprising to me, just because they had a 21-3 lead. But when they did run after that, Big Abdullah run and a couple nice ones by him and Joy. I mean, for the most part, the run game wasn't totally productive. And I think that, they're going to try to get that going, especially after seeing what Carlos Hyde did to the Vikings on Monday.
Yeah. That would be pretty smart. Okay, so I think for the most part, we've covered most of the stuff on the offense I wanted to talk about. But the one thing that I am interested in is Eric Ebron, because he is a person that I actually did not think was a very good pick for the Lions. I just don't think he's a very good tight end. I didn't think he's very good at catching. He's obviously not a very good blocker. I thought it'd be interesting to see him convert to defensive end. But he had a great game the other week. Do you think that this is like a breakout year for him?
It's hard to say, and it really depends on what you think is a breakout year. I think he could be really productive in this offense, but I don't see him getting, 1,000 yards or anything like that, just because you would think Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate are going to get the ball a lot. Plus, Amir Abdullah, showed in camp that he can be a reliable receiver. Joyke Bell has been a really underrated receiver throughout his career. He had over 500 yards receiving a couple of years ago when he and Reggie Bush were splitting the job. And I think he averaged,
against the Vikings.
Yeah, for sure. He averaged almost 10 yards per catch last year, and Theo Riddick did too. So I think the Lions are going to continue to spread the ball around a lot, and I think the reason he ended up getting the most receptions in that game and the most yards was just because he had a couple of nice catches on that desperation drive that they ended up scoring on late in the game. But if you saw his touchdown, the Chargers completely forgot about him. And this was in the first quarter, and it was a play where Calvin Johnson wasn't even on the field, and Ebron somehow just ran right up the seam and was wide open. So clearly, if that matchup against air is going to continue to be there, I would think the Lions would keep trying to exploit it. But I don't expect that to happen, especially now that they've shown that this card is definitely going to be a part of their offense.
Sure. And then on the other side of the ball, you said that the matchup's going to be a little bit more interesting than we may have initially previewed, especially with the return of DeAndre Levy. I was talking to some Lions folks on Twitter, and the linebacker group that y'all put out there last week, they indicated that they have a problem with players who in particular have agility. Is that something that will be fixed with DeAndre Levy coming back? Do you even see that as a problem without DeAndre Levy, or how do you evaluate the linebacker situation?
Well, no, Levy is by far their best linebacker in coverage. I would say he's probably the best tackling linebacker, and last year he was really good against the run. He's really the complete package. He's one of the best outside linebackers in the league, and I think we noticed too. Stephen Tulloch had a really bad game. There's no two ways around that. He looked slow. He struggled covering tight ends, especially got juked out by Danny Woodhead a few times too. So I think he missed Levy, especially because this was only the third game since he's been with the Lions that he didn't play with Levy next to him. So I think there's still a lot that the Lions have to overcome with that loss for as long as it's going to end up being. And as I said, the Lions just haven't been saying, what or when, he could be back. So I think that would help. But the Lions, what they should really be focused on this week is getting Darius Slay healthy, because if he's not, I don't know that the Lions have another cornerback that can run with Mike Wallace. And the Lions, much like the Vikings, keep their cornerbacks on the same side for the game. But if Slay is out, he's their best option. Then you go to Rasheed Mathis, who's 35 now, or might be 34. Excuse me, I don't want to age him any more than he already is. But then Josh Wilson's another guy in his 30s who would probably end up starting. So yeah, injuries could be a big problem for the Lions. They might get Karan Reed, who would probably be their number 3 defensive tackle in the rotation. He might come back. He was practicing for the first time since suffering a high ankle sprain. But really, if Levy's not there, everyone will have to play much better because Mathis struggled a bit, James Ahedibo struggled a bit, and you saw, Keenan Allen got 15 catches, 166 yards, mostly just running short routes and then running towards the middle of the field where no one could tackle him. And Ladarius Green had a big game. Stevie Johnson had a big game. So really, the Vikings, if they can just complete some short passes and if the Lions play like they did last week, I don't know that the Lions would be able to handle it. Unless of course.
Right. So I guess target the middle of the field is a pretty decent game plan until Levy's at full health.
Definitely.
Then on sort of on maybe not the flip side of that, but on a different tack, the Vikings run game struggled last week in part because of the offensive line, in part because of some of the discomfort that Adrian Peterson had with pistol snaps / shotgun snaps. With the way that the Lions' defensive line is constructed right now, do you think that those struggles will continue for the Vikings going into this Lions game?
In the run game, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, the Chargers had mixed results. I mean, the Lions overall, did fairly well in the run game, but part of that obviously had to do with the fact that the Chargers were so successful with those short passes, and once they sort of made that adjustment, they never really, needed to go back to the run game. But I think I imagine by now that Norv Turner probably knows the Lions well enough to know that those defensive linemen are going to be jumping off the ball and being very aggressive, and I think that's something that on a couple of the biggest run plays for the Chargers, that's something that they exploited because they had a couple really nice shotgun draw plays that caught the Lions by surprise. I haven't double-checked these plays yet, but I'm pretty sure that's how Danny Woodhead scored both of his touchdowns. So if the Vikings are willing to utilize Peterson like that, that could definitely be something that's effective. But I would expect that Tola was so frustrated after last game that I think, there will be a fire under him to really play well. And when he plays well, he's great in run support. So I would think that it might not be a game where Adrian Peterson, suddenly goes off for 200 yards. But if the Vikings can do something schematically to get him past that defensive line, he could do a lot of damage.
Do you think the trade for Haloti Ngata was a smart one, given the compensation?
The compensation part actually, makes it sort of 50-50 in my eyes. But overall, I mean, he was really the best option that they had to come in and fill that void and fill it well. I mean, he didn't have an amazing game on Sunday, but I mean, he got double team for most of the game, for most of the plays that he was in. And there are very few guys that command double teams as much as he does. And so when you're replacing a guy like Sue, I mean, there's a lot of value in something like that. And I think Tyron Walker looked really good, and obviously, if the two of them work well together, yeah, definitely. Based on what we've seen so far, anyway, especially because the Lions dealt with Nick Fairley for a few years, who was so inconsistent, and even if Walker doesn't have the same ceiling as Fairley, that consistency is something that the Lions will appreciate having. But yeah, Ngata, I mean, I think the Lions want to have him back, and I think when you're staring at $8.5 million on the books as opposed to the 16.5 they pay, or almost 17 that they paid Sue last year, and the upper 20s that it would have cost them this year, I think they don't mind paying him that at all.
Okay. So I think based off of what you've been saying about how the Lions performed and why they performed that way against the Chargers, a lot of this might be contingent upon the health of the unit on defense overall. Is that right?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, Slay and Levy are two of the best defensive players, and if for some reason both those guys aren't there, and I think Slay probably will. I mean, he was limited today, but just the fact that he was able to practice at all after suffering an ankle injury on Sunday is probably a good sign. But yeah, definitely health will be a major factor.
You wrote on Twitter earlier today, I think the Lions could win, but I'll probably pick the Vikings. Would you care to expound upon your reasoning?
Well, that was just I don't know why people are asking for prediction on a Wednesday, but yeah, I think that the home new debut, whatever you guys are going to call it, with Adrian Peterson, I would imagine that the Vikings will do everything in their power to perform well, and you'd like to say that's the case every week, but I mean, home opener for any team is a difficult game to win. I think Teddy Bridgewater almost beat the Lions last year. I mean, one more completion in that game, and the Vikings probably win that one. So I think with Mike Wallace on board, Kyle Rudolph back, I think their offense has enough to exploit some of the weaknesses on the Lions' defense. And then defensively, I think, with Xavier Rhodes and Harrison Smith over the middle, I think, and if Everson Griffin can be productive, I think the Vikings will be able to limit the Lions. I think it'll be a close game, certainly, but and the winner wouldn't surprise me either way. But based on what I saw last week from the Lions, I don't know that they're all of a sudden going to be clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah, fair enough. So you just said, why are we asking for predictions on a Wednesday? That's exactly what we're about to do.
A very detailed prediction, in fact.
Yeah, it's going to be a score prediction. I believe every single one of our score predictions last year was wrong. Dusty will know if that's not the case. But we do them anyway because it's a lot of fun.
None of them were correct. So, got pretty close a couple times. I think the closest we've been is within 3 points of the final score. But, it's neither handmaids nor shoes, so...
So, knowing that there's a high chance that you'll be wrong, and knowing that because of that you won't be accountable, what is your score prediction for the game?
Well, I already had to file this for the newspaper, and I picked 24 to 20 Vikings.
Having filed it in the newspaper already, he has cleverly found a way to avoid scooping himself by disguising it in a garbled Skype call.
Well, and I hope people aren't running to get the newspaper to see what I'm picking in a game that I have no control over. But hey, if people are upset that they hear it here first, then I apologize.
Well, they won't. I mean, the newspaper realistically will come out before this episode reaches the airwaves. So if you absolutely must know what Josh Katzenstein thinks the score of the game this weekend will be on Thursday morning, then the Detroit News is the place to get it. But no, you said 24-3 Minnesota. Was that correct? I mean, you did actually break up a little bit there.
Oh yeah, sorry, 24-20 Minnesota.
All right. Arif, what is your prediction?
I think that's a pretty good prediction, but we have a sort of an unwritten rule that you can't steal someone else's predictions. I think if there's anything to the idea that a team bounces back from a bad loss much better than they do a close victory. I think that the Vikings will correct probably a lot of the issues that they had. Maybe on the offensive line, I'm still worried about them. But I think defensively, they've got the talent, they've got the scheme, and usually the discipline to be a lot better. So I think, despite the talented players like Amir Abdullah and Calvin Johnson, I would predict the Vikings win, and I'm going to say it's probably a little bit lower. I'm going to say it's 2017.
Okay. Yeah, low score game when I'm Friday.
I am going to go the opposite way from both of you and say that the Vikings learn nothing in their botch in the Bay and continue to have issues with getting the offense going, and some defensive miscues lead a Lions team that is surprisingly healthy to a 17-3 victory over the Vikings.
Oh, and I don't know if Josh knows this, but his prediction is actually very close to sort of I wouldn't say Boveda prediction, but pretty close to what Boveda's odds imply the game is going to be, which is a 23-20 game in favor of the Vikings. So
I did know that because. Well, I mean, since I'm never going to get a prediction right, I think that Vegas knows a lot more than I do, so I might as well check what they're feeling. I might as well check what those bookies are feeling on the game and do my prediction based on that, unless for some reason I have some surprise insight. But the wise guys are a lot closer than we are.
I employ that strategy nearly every week when I take my score prediction on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way to go.
So I actually kind of cut your Dusty, you can finish. What's your reason for why the Lions are winning? Just because the Vikings are dumb, or?
Well, the Vikings will have learned nothing, and the Detroit defense will appear surprisingly. All the questionables will play, at least for enough of the game to dishearten the Vikings and disappoint the fans. And the offense will sputter. Again, Adrian Peterson will struggle with the combined pistol/shotgun handoff situation again. But the Lions will not be fooled by it. They will not be fooled by all those nonsensical screen passes to Adrian Peterson. They
You're hiding a lot of anger, Dusty.
We didn't fool the 49ers either. Not for us.
All right. Before we let you go, Josh, any parting shots?
No. I think I've said my piece. Thanks for having me on, guys.
I do have one last question for you. Would you rather be underpaid or overrated?
Wait, other way around.
No, that's correct.
Underpaid or overrated?
That's how he says it. Yeah. I would always say underpaid. As much as that paid, because I've lived most of my life as a journalist underpaid, so it would be nothing new. But I would hate to be someone known to disappoint, I suppose, is how I would answer that question.
I don't think any newspaper writer would ever say overrated.
I would hope not.
If so, then they're kind of in the wrong industry, right?
I mean, from my opinion, yes, but obviously Twitter has opened up so many windows into the lives of people in the media and colored my opinions in different ways that I never thought existed. So I'm sure there are plenty of reporters out there that would love to be overrated. And probably love that they are currently overrated.
Right? They would never tell you so. They would probably tell you they are correctly rated.
Yeah, probably.
People love me, and that is accurate.
Right there. They are correct to love me. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Josh. It was a pleasure having you. We'd love to have you on again sometime. Next.
Just let me know.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Joshua Katzenstein of the Detroit News. I personally would much rather be overrated than underpaid. But that is because, as James correctly identified during last week's show, I am very lazy. Yesterday, 2 days ago, the last episode, whenever that was, internet time. The point is,
I guess I'm okay with the esteem that comes with being underpaid and therefore underrated. I would just like to be paid a little bit more. I don't have to be paid appropriate to my salary or appropriate to the amount of work that I put in or the skill of the work that I put in. But I would like just a little bit more money. But I don't ever want to be overrated. So I think I just need enough money to live somewhat comfortably, and then I can live off of people's esteem.
Well, I mean, I think Jay-Z kind of phrased it as binary choice. But yes, your third way is correct, and the definition of meritocracy.
I'm just saying I'm kind of real underpaid.
Well, but then you would just be like more correctly paid. Really, at the end of the day, I think what we all want is to be correctly paid.
I would be fine if I made minimum wage, which I think is underpaying me still by a lot.
Minimum wage is underpaid. Like for adults doing like a full-time job, I think it is by like definition underpaying them. At least that's the idea.
Right. So I would like to make as much as minimum wage. So I'd still be very underpaid.
But I bet once you made minimum wage, you would be okay with getting paid just a little more.
Well, I'm always okay getting paid a little more. I'm saying the choice is.
But you butt up against becoming overrated. Like when do you stop accepting the base? You know, that's. It's kind of the crux of the question, Arif.
Well, it is, but I'm just saying the question introduces two spectra and then asks us to choose the extreme of either spectra. Not even the extreme of either spectra, just, a point on either spectra. And I'm just saying I'm willing to lose slightly, a little bit of esteem to gain a little bit of pay so that I know that I can eat every day. Like that would be great, knowing that I can eat every day. So I think I'm still choosing the underpaid, portion of the spectrum. I'm just moving it a little bit from where I am. I assume I have, esteem from people, I guess, is also part of it.
I imagine some of your Twitter followers are not fake, yes.
Some of them.
I know I'm a real person.
At least one. Fantastic.
You have at least one fan.
Right. We have more to record, right?
Yeah. This would actually be a good time to remind our listeners that they can become patrons of North Code and help feed poor hungry Arif by going to our Patreon page at patreon.com/NorseCode. You can make a recurring pledge, a monthly pledge of any dollar amount you choose. You can give us $1 a month, you can give us $20 a month, you can give us $100 a month. You give us whatever you want. And that money is, automatically debited. We get, the lion's share of it. We will be providing fun little tokens of our esteem to those who become our patrons. We have mentioned hats and T-shirts in the past, but what we also are considering, there are plenty of them left, believe it or not, but we are considering sending out, excuse me, goodness, what appear to be Lego people in the college colors of Christian Ponder, complete with helmet and water bottle. And
the college colors, of course, being of the Florida State Seminoles, the college that Christian Ponder attended. This is a thing that we can get and give to you, which we just found out very recently, which is phenomenal news, I think, for everybody.
It's true. I had no idea that there was a market for NFLPA licensed Lego men. They're not Lego branded; they are Oyo branded. But looking at the pictures on the Amazon website, and we'll include a link to the College Christian Ponder. Why would anybody make those?
Hey, College Christian Ponder was the beginning of Florida State's resurgence. It was Ponder, then it was Manuel, then it was Winston. And now it's Golson, I guess, which is confusing because he went to Notre Dame. But, yeah, I mean, Florida State fans were very big fans of Christian Ponder until they realized that because of their recruiting prowess that they could do a lot better. And he was pretty good in college, but, not as good as, say, Jameis.
Well, that's the thing about Golson is that he's only there because he respected their recruiting prowess. He let himself be recruited in his senior year by Florida State.
So that's what you can get.
Well, maybe. I mean, we haven't bought the Florida State Seminoles ones yet. A little bird is telling me that the Christian Ponder Minnesota Vikings men are no longer available. At least not on Amazon. So
we could go to eBay maybe.
You may have missed the boat on those, or perhaps not. The only way to know for sure is to go to patreon.com/NorseCode and become a patron of the show, because we like money. As much as I would love to be overrated, I would also accept being underpaid or paid all. And consequently, please feel free to continue supporting the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. Right then. I love how on Twitter it took maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes after the game ended. I mean, the clock ran out, not the actual, Law and Order gavel, end of the game in the third quarter or whatever. But it took a minute, maybe two, until the negative Nancy started crawling out of the woodwork. Fire everyone. What's Christian Ponder doing lately? Is he still in Oakland? What's AP is done. Stick a fork in him. His career is over.
That was amazing how quickly that happened. And the thing is, there's pretty good reason to believe that Adrian Peterson has done it as a running back. That game provided no evidence one way or the other. The reasoning is solely that he's 30 and not, anything else. There's just as much reason, arguably more reason that Adrian Peterson is not, done as a running back. And that game also provided no evidence to that effect. The idea that he's uncomfortable under shotgun has a lot of weight. We discussed this on the last episode of the podcast. So, man, whatever.
Right, all the stuff about how inaccurate Teddy is, like, we're saddled with a bad quarterback for another decade, and it's like, man, this is weak.
I saw a lot of ponderitis quotes. He has ponderitis, and some of them were like, I'm sure he'll get rid of it, but a lot of it's like, oh man, I can't believe we drafted another Christian Ponder. It's like, no,
easy. It's not like that. It's not like that at all.
There's a lot of week one reactions, and because I'm obviously more connected to the Vikings fan universe than other fan universes, it seemed to me that they were more prone to those kind of overreactions in week one for Vikings fans than most fans were. But, I can imagine a lot, and I know that Seahawks fans were pretty quick to react to the Seahawks getting embarrassed by St. Louis, although they've got a pretty strong fan blogging presence that sort of tamped those down pretty quickly. In part because St. Louis has always beaten the crap out of Seattle. I don't really know why.
It's just a thing that happens.
Well, I mean, I guess we can know why. It's that their biggest strength is Seattle's biggest weakness, the defensive line versus the offensive line, and then, I don't know, they're familiar with each other, stuff. But yeah, so my favorite actually it's also Seahawks related. My favorite is that Russell Wilson tweeted out, like he does before every single game he's ever played in the NFL, he tweeted out 1-0. Because the Seahawks, the organizational philosophy or the philosophy for the team is that you don't look at your record, you just want to go 1-0 this week. That's the whole idea. So that's what he tweeted out. And then a bunch of people after the game, retweeted that. And that was a day later, right? The game's a day after he tweeted that out. Retweeted that, and they were like, you sucked, you lost, I can't believe you predicted that you would win, which is not, it was not really what he was doing. He wasn't really predicting he was going to win. He was, that was a goal. But B, why would you want a quarterback that was going to predict you were going to lose? He's going to do it next week, and they're going to be 0-1, and everyone's just going to be like, I can't believe you're so confused.
Right, we may not win this game. Like, can you imagine the Twitter firestorm if Phillip Rivers came out and was like, I don't know if we can win this game, you guys.
Yeah, they're a really good team, and we're not as good as them, frankly.
We're really not.
We have to have the ball now to win. We're probably not going to deserve it if we do win. So.
I don't really feel good about these guys that are like protecting me, that I'm throwing the ball to. Like, I don't know. Yeah, it's not good PR by any stretch. But and I guess a lot of the hate flames were fanned before the Zimmer press conference, where he was like, Teddy sucked. The offensive line sucked, but Teddy did too. Everybody sucked. I actually thought, I guess it might have been when he tweeted right after the game that he was going to, for the game, Zimmer was going to make the entire team run laps.
Mitch, speaking of Zimmer, I tweeted out a pretty great selection. So I get an email from the Vikings every time there's a press conference, and I get a transcription of the press conference. And so, most of the time it's not that interesting because the beat writers have already tweeted out the best nuggets from the presser. For some reason, that didn't happen. As of the day of this recording, and so I got to read through the presser as with fresh eyes, and it was beautiful because there's a bunch of like very Greg Popovich, which a lot of people pointed out on Twitter, a lot of Greg Popovich type answers, 5 or 6 words in a sentence, maybe even one, and they're just like, where are you guys emotionally? We're good, we're ready to roll. Did you watch a lot of film from the other night? We watched some of it, yes. Did you say anything in your team meeting today, or did you say your piece the other night? I always have a team meeting on Wednesday. Did you say anything you'd like to share with us? No. Just try ways I have to be moving forward to crack the lineup in some capacity. Cover a guy better. All right.
Well, we were all, actually, it turned out not all of us were thinking it, because many people on Twitter had different reactions, including fire everyone. So.
Zimmer's overrated after the game. That was pretty good. Like, overrated how? He's 7-9 record. 7-10 now. Like, chill.
I'm out of here. What's Urban Meyer doing?
I would pay a lot of money to watch an Urban Meyer or a Gus Malzahn coached NFL team. That would be awesome.
I know now that I say it, like I was just joking, but I mean, now that I say it, that actually may not be the worst.
That actually sounds really fun. And hey, Tim Tebow could have another chance. No one wants that.
Oh, no one. I think it's pretty clear now that no one wants that. Really, like, even the man upstairs doesn't want it, because Tim Tebow, like, everything went wrong for him. I firmly believe this, when he was caught in a photograph signing a Bible.
What? Wait, okay, first, tell me the story. B, how did everything go wrong for him because of it?
Well, it's either a Bible or another book with gold edged pages, because you can't see the cover of the book as he's signing it, but he's in his a practice uniform. I forget if it was a Florida or Denver practice uniform, but early-ish in his career, somebody was leaning over the stands holding a book with gold pages, and he was signing it. And I presume it was a Bible. And given the depth and breadth of his faith, do a Google image search right now.
I've already done that. It's so he did one at Eagles training camp, but I totally believe you that he did it in other training camps as well.
But that he has done it before. I don't given the breadth and depth of his professed faith. I feel like he would know that is not something that you were supposed to do.
Well, it's not like the Bible's like the Quran, right? Like the Quran, you're supposed to treat the book with. I don't want to say you don't treat the Bible with reverence, but the physical book, the Quran, culturally, it's not actually a rule in Islam, but culturally, you're not supposed to put other books on top of it, and that's why it became such a thing when I don't want to get political, but it became such a thing when they started flushing it down the toilet in Guantanamo Bay and stuff. But from my understanding, the Bible isn't treated physically with the same kind of rules, but I didn't grow up Christian.
Culturally, it is. I think. I don't think there's any hard and fast rule, at least not in the New Testament, about not signing a Bible. But I mean, culturally, it's idolatry of a sort. And,
okay, well then, it's basically the same.
Yeah, frowned upon by whatever power issued people to write the book in the first place. Right. So for people, it just seems like a really silly thing to do, and really tempting fate or inviting wrath, whatever you want to call it.
Well, is it better if you sign the inside? Because I know that Christianity, you can write in the margins, you can highlight and stuff, and that's even frowned upon in most versions of Muslim culture. So what do you sign the inside?
I would say signing the inside is better than signing the cover. Signing the cover is would you want to display a Bible that had Tim Tebow's signature in silver Sharpie on the outside cover in your home? That's.
Well, if you're the kind of person to ask Tim Tebow for an autograph for your Bible, then yes, absolutely, you'd want to display it.
I guess, but I don't know.
It does seem wrong. And then when I clicked on a couple of the links, they had the embedded tweet, and then you take a look at sort of the responses that people have to that tweet. Yeah, a lot of people also had issues with it. So, fair enough. But even most of the responses are just like, this makes me uncomfortable, unless, this is awful, he should be burned. It's more like, that's awkward.
Yeah, why are you doing this, Tim Tebow? And I enjoy the idea of just very pedestrian and silly divine retribution.
just do get paid a lot of money, it won't be in football. That's what you get.
Making Tim Tebow think that he still has a career as an NFL quarterback, but he never really does.
What's interesting to me is when they compare Terrell Pryor, who agreed to a position switch, I don't want to say right away, but fairly early, obviously, in his career to become a wide receiver, to Tim Tebow, who refused a position switch. As if, these things were different for both of them. Obviously, it may have been better for Tebow to switch positions to fullback or eight-back. But you know if you can catch the ball. Terrell Pryor, evidently, is somewhat natural catching the ball, kind of like Braxton Miller. So I feel like the pressure on Terrell Pryor was probably different than the pressure from Tim Tebow. Probably.
That's probably accurate, and my suspicion is that Terrell Pryor, if his career had gone that way, probably would not have refused to play in Canada, insisting that God meant for him to play in the NFL, not the NFL's nerdy little brother.
Oh wow! I just saw the original tweet where Tim Tebow signed the Bible, and the tweet is worded pretty neutrally, like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure someone got Tim Tebow to sign a Bible. Didn't know how I missed this before." #Eagles, and the responses are just like, "So what? And what's the big deal? Oh, he's a Christian, and that's bad." And the person who tweeted that is like, "No, I just have never seen an athlete sign one. I don't see how I said that was bad." It's like a lot of "so what" and "screw you" for tweeting this out.
That's what is known as righteous outrage.
Man, that's a lot of responses. I'll post the tweet in the show notes so that you can the show notes on Daily Everton so that you can click on it and see the responses because they're pretty good.
There are a few pretty good Twitter threads about the Tim Tebow Bible signing incident or incidents.
Bible signing incident.
Bible Ghazi.
Where's the pen? Where's the pen, Tim Tebow?
Where's the pen? You know you have it. It's in his private desk. It's not a public desk that he was supposed to be using, like everyone else on the team was using.
Well, he was told that the private desk would be okay, and he missed the meeting that said he was supposed to be. I mean, come on.
If he had known, he would have just used the same desk everyone else was using. But he had his own desk, so he was like, "Why not send the Bible there?"
It's weird because it's a different private desk to investigators, and he got destroyed. Sorry.
Okay, that's too far. You have gone too far, and I will reward you with your newest feature, the BAD-FSA, otherwise known as Bi-Weekly or Daily Fantasy Sports Advice.
Do we really want advice to contain the word "bad" in the acronym?
No, bi-weekly.
Yeah, but it's BAD-FSA. And so it's the acronym initialism, but the initialism has the word "bad" in it.
It's work in progress, all right?
So it's named the Bad Fantasy Sports Advice.
The Bad FSA, whatever that's worth. Sponsored of draftwho.com.
Fanweb.com. Yeah. Well, I gave some advice last week about generic roster setup and how, depending on the type of pool that you're in, you want to change the variance of your strategy. And I included a couple of players to sort of make that point. Antonio Brown, low variance player. Chris Johnson, extremely high variance player, especially this week. And so depending on the kind of tournament that you're deciding to enter, the kind of cash game that you're entering, you want to change your strategy. So that was that episode. This episode, I just want to emphasize something I briefly mentioned in the last episode, which is that you really need to figure out what the rules for your fantasy service is. So, and there's a couple. I mean, it's not just FanDuel, DraftKings. There's like Fictive, and there's Own the Play, and there's Something Star. I mean, there's a lot. But just happen to grab those investors and that might be dealing at that. Those ones you get the most out.
Would you say there is value in playing on some of the smaller sites as opposed to playing in these, millionaire maker contests that have such an infinitesimal chance of paying out? And frankly, given that there's only so many players in the NFL, are probably going to top the top prize multiple ways?
I haven't heard of the top prize being chopped multiple ways yet, which is surprising because I guess, I don't know that anyone's used an optimal lineup yet, which is kind of crazy. But it's much more likely that that's going to happen.
Well, no, as soon as you say larger and larger, right?
Yeah. But no, so I would say that I am a member of one of the smaller sites as well. And the advantage of these smaller sites is that there's something called more overlay. I mentioned that on the last episode, which is that if there's a guaranteed prize pool, there's a certain number of people, obviously, who are guaranteed to win. And for a daily fantasy service, they want as many people to enter that tournament as possible, obviously, until they get to the limit for that particular tournament. It's much harder to do that in one of these smaller sites, and so there's a lot more overlay at smaller sites. So you can artificially increase your odds by entering a tournament that doesn't have that many entrants. You can't control that because as soon as you enter, you can't get a refund at most of the sites. If they own the play, you might be able to get a refund before 24 hours before the game starts, so you can pull out. But I know at DraftKings and FanDuel, they don't really let you pull out of an entry. But yeah, once you enter, it could be such that it fills up right away. But at the smaller sites, it's much less likely to fill up right away. So there's less overlay and much more likelihood for you to be able to win. So there is that. But the programming for those sites and the customer service for the sites is not as good. So, for example, FanDuel last year in week 1 just went down like 30 minutes before the game started. And there's nothing people could do. Injury reports were coming in. People could modify their rosters. It became a huge mess. FanDuel refunded everybody. Some of these smaller sites might be obligated to, but they might not. Or they might tell you that they have no obligation to do that. So that's something that you have to watch out for. As for actually playing in these different sites, you have to be very aware of the differences that are in scoring. So, for example, FanDuel, if there's a return touchdown, interception, punt, kickoff, fumble, whatever, return touchdown, those do not count against the defense. In DraftKings, they do because it's a defense special teams. But in FanDuel, it's just defense, it's just team defense, and so any points that the defense allows counts as points. Now, of course, if someone returns a fumble up to the 1 yard line and then the offense takes the field and then scores, that counts. But for the most part, you don't hurt by turnovers and special teams miscues in FanDuel than you are in DraftKings. So you have to be aware of sort of the general fantasy special teams matchup, like if you're playing against 2008 Devin Hester or something like that. So that's something you have to pay attention to. You have to pay attention to the fact that there's different points per reception. So Antonio Brown is more valuable in DraftKings than FanDuel. FanDuel does kickers, DraftKings does not. Fumbles in FanDuel cost twice as much in terms of points than DraftKings, and in DraftKings there's bonus thresholds, whereas in FanDuel there's not. So in DraftKings you get a 3-point bonus if a player gets 100 yards receiving, 100 yards rushing, or 300 yards passing. They just don't exist in FanDuel, and so DraftKings you have to understand that you want a player, and this is it relates to how you're going to play high variance versus low variance strategies. If you have a low variance player that scores 85 yards in a game, that's actually a pretty good player for FanDuel. But for DraftKings, it might be worth it to get the player that is, 40% likely to score above 100 yards because that's, 3 more points. And 3 more points times 0.4 is still, more. So that's the general advice that I would give if you're dipping your toes into the daily fantasy water. Just remember, they offer beginner games. You want to play those beginner games because those are folks that aren't as good, obviously, and you're not going to have to go up against multi-entry people, and you're not going to have to go up against those people who have thousands of lineups that are set by algorithms that are automatically changed based off of software that they have linked to the website. So play the beginner games, because you can make money on those at least.
And those tend to be set up to where 40 to 50% of the less than 50% of the field, but like 40 to 48% of the field gets paid out. Like it's basically a double your money, nothing, right?
Right, exactly. Most of those are either double ups, which guaranteed prize pool, or 50-50, which is half the people you don't automatically win.
Because they have some money. So just to wrap up, you are saying that it would be a mistake to run the same fantasy lineup on equivalent FanDuel and DraftKings leagues in 1 week.
Almost always. If you for whatever reason, and if you for whatever reason have a low variance strategy and you have a lineup featuring Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski and the Seahawks, and then you're relying on pretty good, consistent, high floor, low ceiling players, I could see them doing well in both, but you really have to be cognizant of the differences, and most of the time, pay attention to those differences.
Well, so that was one question I thought of as I was listening to this week's earlier episode. How much of your team should you, like you were talking about how employing a high variance strategy is generally preferable, adjusting somewhat for the percentage of people in your tournament that get paid out, because at the end of the day, you want first place or to finish in the money, and it doesn't matter how much money you save, how much salary you have left over, how efficient your team is. It matters how many points they score for you. So, right. How much? I mean, you talked about employing a low variance strategy occasionally, or in a different type of league. How much?
Yeah, 50/50 is the best place to employ low variance strategies.
Yeah. So my question then is, how differently should you look at a player like Rob Gronkowski in a 50/50 versus a millionaire maker? Or actually, Rob Gronkowski's probably not a good example because he's just like so far the best tight end.
No, he's not a good example because he's surprisingly efficient despite being by far the most expensive tight end.
What about Cole Beasley?
Yeah, well, Cole Beasley is going to be an interesting question going into the week. Cole Beasley, I would consider to be a relatively high variance player, and he's definitely going to be efficient. And so, because he's not going to be, the way they construct the algorithms for determining salary, he's not going to be owned. He wasn't owned that much last week, so he's not going to cost that much. So he's going to be both an efficient and a high variance strategy player. And so he's the kind of player that you might want to play to give yourself money to play a high floor and high ceiling kind of player like Rob Gronkowski or, Antonio Brown, who I think are probably the two best examples of really good value, expensive players in daily fantasy. So I think in both in your millionaire maker strategy or in your guaranteed prize pool strategy, in your only a couple people can win strategy, I think Cole Beasley makes more sense than in your low variance strategy. But I probably will play Cole Beasley in both of those things, just because when the top player goes down, the algorithms don't really do a good job of adjusting for that. So he's going to be surprisingly cheap. I'm not saying he's going to produce more than 40 yards or anything like that, but he's still getting the salary that doesn't befit a 40-yard player.
So do you have any players in mind who would illustrate the difference between somebody you would want in a millionaire maker, like a winner take most league versus a 50/50 league?
Yeah, I think the best example this week is Chris Johnson. I don't know how much time he's going to get in Arizona now that Andre Ellington is hurt. I don't know if they're going to give those carries to David Johnson. But we know who Chris Johnson is. He scores a lot of touchdowns in some games, and he doesn't score anything in other games. Some games he has 20, 30, 40 yards and 2.1 yards a carry. And in other games he has 80 yards a carry and 150 yards and 2 touchdowns and 4 receptions. So that's the kind of player that I think is exactly the kind of high variance player that can do well. Rookie quarterbacks who are good at running the ball. Marcus Mariota. Obviously, when Robert Griffin was good, him. Those are players that are very high variance that I think can either win or lose a league for you. But the margin of loss doesn't matter. So he's the kind of player that I play in a couple of those high variance lineups. So yeah, those are the two players that I think are pretty good examples.
Well, there you go. That is your bad FSA for episode 83, brought to you by draftdom.net, where you can get $300,000 in bonus matching with the promo code DickButt.
All right.
That was a pretty great promo, right?
That was perfect.
Yes, we're gonna make so much sweet affiliate money on that promo. Who is there anyone left to sign up with a different promo code? If you're just getting into podcasting thinking that affiliate marketing is going to be your golden ticket, how is your promo code going to compete with any of the other ones out there? How many people are just punching in random promo codes?
That in the promo codes that we got when we did have affiliates were give you less money than the promo codes they're showing on TV right now. You get a $200, $300 matching on some of these TV promos. We got $100, maybe $60 matching. And so
I think it started out at 50. I think we ended up at 100. It didn't matter because nobody signed up.
Right.
This promise of money was only that.
Right. So the promo codes externally were far better. But yeah, I mean, if someone goes into podcasting hoping to get the sweet affiliate money, good luck.
Don't do it. He would like to be both overrated and underpaid. Sports podcasting is the hobby for you. Regrettably, we have an empty mailbag this week. Or not this week, this episode.
Did we put out the signal?
Yeah, a bat signal was issued, and Vincent Frank expressed a small quantity of butthurt that we did not invite him back on to recap the 49ers game.
We never invite people for the recap. Come on.
What's that about?
Well, I will answer the question that Jesse Silva asked me while we were recording the last podcast, but it was as we were wrapping up.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So he asked me, actually, let me look it up real quick.
Well, I will say, though, that we did give Vincent props in the last episode when we mentioned the possible effects of traveling to the West Coast for a primetime game on the Vikings' preparedness and alertness and just sort of readiness level. So thanks for that, Vincent. That's probably why we lost.
Yeah, Jesus, Vincent. So Jesse Silva asks, how much of a boost can we reasonably expect from John Sullivan, when he gets back, and is he still a top 5 center? So obviously I don't know if he's still a top 5 center, but I'm going to reasonably assume that he is, because I thought he was last year, even though he didn't play as well last year as he did the 2 years prior. And I think in 2012 he was like the top center in the NFL, which helps explain some of the absurd rushing yards the Vikings got that year. But I still think he's a top 5 center, and it's not just when you look at centers. I was talking to Scott Krasik of the Falcons fandom about this. When you look at centers, it's much more difficult to evaluate centers on film or in general than it is anything else, because it's not like they're a third guard. Like Pro Football Focus kind of treats the center like they're a third guard, and so you evaluate them only on their blocking. And Krasik pointed out that when you replaced, Peter Kahns with Joe Hawley, I think was this example for the Falcons, the protection got a lot better for the Falcons, because Hawley was much better at identifying potential blitzers, setting protections, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that was clearly an issue in this game with the Vikings. And like I said, I don't know if that's entirely on Berger, but I think that he bears probably a significant amount of responsibility for it. Teddy, of course, says that he himself bears a significant amount of responsibility for it, and he's probably right about that actually too. But the center makes a lot of line adjustments, and so a center who is a little bit worse at blocking but much better at identifying potential blitzers and making sure that the line in general is aware of their responsibilities is going to help you a lot more. I would say that taking into account both his blocking and his ability to provide a lot more from the preparation side of things to the Vikings, I would say that he's definitely a top 5 center. If it's just his blocking, I think that he is probably a top 5 center, but I'm a little bit less sure about that. As for how much of a boost the Vikings can reasonably expect, I know that ESPN said that Teddy was pressured on like 27% of his dropbacks. I think that said something like 35% of his dropbacks. We know from watching the game, and I know from rewatching the offense in particular, that was whatever the amount of pressure ended up being, it was far too much. And I think that Tom Brady turns into Blaine Gabbert basically when there's pressure, and Tom Brady is good under pressure too. But it's just that a quarterback who plays under pressure throws passes as if he's the worst quarterback in the league. And Teddy Bridgewater's not even, the best quarterback in the NFL under pressure, although he was pretty close actually last year. But he's still not going to be as good in terms of like pass rating, yards per attempt, results in the field, etc. In terms of being able to deal with pressure. So if you can minimize that, cut that by 5 percentage points, that's good. By 10 percentage points, that's great. If you can cut that by a third overall, then I think that the Vikings offense is going to be a lot better, because remember, it was a 20-3 game. It felt worse because the Vikings were sloppy, but 2 mistakes and that game is a 1-score game. And I think that, it would have affected those two mistakes, but I think that if, Teddy converts another third down somewhere where he was pressured, and if he's not pressured on that third down and he completes it, then I think the Vikings are much more closer in that game. So I think that it's going to provide a significant boost to the offense when he comes back. We've seen this happen before. The Seattle Seahawks were much, much better when the center that they ended up trading to the New Orleans Saints, whose name escapes me right now. Googling it right now if you can hear the typing. Max Unger. When Max Unger was injured last year, when he came back, Marshawn Lynch's rushing totals increased, and that wasn't just an effect of the opponents that they played because, Football Outsiders had to correct for that. Russell Wilson, his yards per attempt went up. A lot of things improved significantly when Max Unger returned back from injury. So I think a similar sort of effect can be had from John Sullivan coming back when that happens, if it happens.
It had better.
You're going to, beat up John Sullivan?
No, or we may have issues with the formula.
We might very likely have issues with the formula.
I guess so I had a few key moments from the the botch in the bay, such as it is. And the first, my favorite moment, the one that made me laugh the hardest, was when they briefly trotted out Blair Walsh to attempt a 63-yard field goal.
Oh, my God. So I actually have not a ton of issue with the decision in general to kick a 63-yard field goal at the end of a half. Well, no, but
they came back.
But then they
we can't do this. This is never going to happen. And Blair Walsh proved them right later on by missing from 44. But I saw that starting to happen, and I was like, this can't. And so I started getting the sinking, Vikings fan suspicion that we were going to lose this game in a really stupid way as the first half was winding down and neither team had scored. And the clock and the possessions were starting to line up in a way where not only would we not score before the end of the half, but Atlanta would get the ball to start the second half, and they would probably score again, right away, and put the game functionally out of reach. And as I watched Blair Walsh trotting out for a 63-yard field goal attempt in the waning seconds of the first half, I was like, well, they're probably going to realize how stupid this is. I was like, the bar was mostly empty, and I was just working, wiping down the bar top and laughing really, really loud. I was like, I cannot believe they're doing this. And in my head, I was like, they're probably going to realize that what they're thinking is insane, call a timeout, bring the actual offense on the field for one anemic play that gets broken up because it's quite obvious what they're going to try, and then we go into the locker room with 0 points, and Atlanta gets the ball. And then the second half started, and that was just the worst thing I've ever seen. My last.
You keep on saying Atlanta instead of San Francisco, which it was Teddy's first game last year, and they both were red. Wait, San Francisco didn't wear red this game.
But the Hawks also wear black.
That's true. They've got good black uniforms, though. That's the difference.
Dude, the 49ers or black uniforms, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. The 49ers black uniforms look like high school uniforms.
They look awful. I think if you
they look like
the
our high school uniforms. We had those same uniforms. Black with red numbers. They said Rough Riders on the front.
Hey, man, I'm a Rough Riders fan for life. I think. I don't follow them.
Well, on how this nickname thing shakes out, if you're a UND hockey fan, you may be a Rough Riders fan for life. Norse Code is the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. It is hosted by the Daily Norseman, Minnesota Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also check us out at norsecodepodcast.com, where if you are so inclined, you will find links to donate either via PayPal or become a recurring contributor to the show through our Patreon page. You can follow Arif Hassan on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am at Dusty O'Connell. Our guest, Josh Katzenstein, is at J Katzenstein. That's a lot of letters. I'm not even going to try to spell it.
I mean, y'all have been exposed to people like Katzenstein or something similar before, so I think you can figure out how it's spelled.
Exactly. You're smart people. You'll figure it out. But you can follow him on Twitter. He is a frequent tweeter as well, and also the beat writer for the Detroit News, Detroit Lions division. You can check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/Daily Norseman. and become a fan of the show there. We always post links to new episodes as they arrive, which now, if you've been listening carefully, is twice a week. So feel free to let us know either in the comments on the Daily Norseman page or on Twitter or on the Reddit thread that accompanies each episode what you think of the change, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see less of. We have not figured out who our guest is going to be next week, but I can promise you that it will be someone good. And as I'm saying that, I realize I should not be promising that. Having said that, we will do our best to bring you a guest just as intrepid as Josh was this week, Vince was last week. And until then, we look forward to our next episode. And our formula is this: keep Teddy alive.
Norse Code is the official podcast of the Daily Norseman SB Nation blog and is produced with cooperation from Pompous Jerk Productions. Pompous Jerk Productions. Attitude with attitude. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of their contributors and do not reflect official positions of the Minnesota Vikings, SB Nation, the Daily Norseman staff, or PJP. No information in this podcast should be construed as gambling advice. Please obey all local gaming laws.
Our formula is this: we go out, we hit people in the mouth.